Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. This is the second of a two-part interview with three-time Pulitzer Prize winning author Edward Albee. It was almost for Edward.
Yeah, the jurors gave the Pulitzer Prize to Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. But then the trustees of Columbia University said no, the play was too what, I don't know, obscene, difficult, something or other. And they took it away. That's fine. I got more publicity out of it being taken away than I would have gotten by winning it.
Isn't it interesting, though, that today we don't look at the play as being too obscene or controversial at all? I mean, really, it seems pretty tame.
It wasn't even then.
What made people react so strongly to it? I remember going to see the movie, and you had to have an adult go with you to see the film, and it was a big deal. And why do you think that there was such an outcry? Did we recognize ourselves too much in it?
I don't know. People were told that it was supposed to be shocking, so they went and were shocked. If nobody told them that, it wouldn't have happened that way.
Why don't we watch another clip of Virginia Woolf?
It's to your taste, blood carnage and all. I thought you'd sort of get excited, sort of heave and pant and come running at me, your melons bobbling.
You have really screwed up, George.
Oh, come on,
I
Mother.
mean it, you really have.
You can sit around with the gin running out of your mouth, you can humiliate me.
When we were talking earlier about the biography that's been written about you, Edward Albee, A Singular Journey, I made the comment, and I really have enjoyed enormously reading Stretching My Mind, your collection of essays. Mm-hmm. And the essays span from 1960 to 2005. Mm-hmm. What do you think can you point to as some of the major changes in your thinking with regard to theater, with regard to life?
I don't know that I've changed my thinking. Maybe, some of the earlier essays probably aren't as thought through as the later essays on, because there are things in there about theater, about painting and sculpture, mm-hmm. about classical music, and about politics. Mm-hmm. And I just think maybe my perceptions get a little bit more intelligent as the years go on.
Mm-hmm. Ever since you first wrote the Zoo story, critics have been talking about these roles that family and religion play in your work. What do you see as your primary themes?
Damned if I know. I don't think in those terms. I don't think about myself in the third person.
That's interesting. It's a good way to probably proceed. We were talking about Pulitzer Prizes. You won your first Pulitzer Prize for A Delicate Balance, yes. Which is a beautiful play.
The first one they were willing to give me.
Yeah, the first one they were willing to give you. That's a good point. And it came for you, I'm sure, at a good time in your career. I love this play. I was reading it recently again as well. When you go back and you look at this play, do you see anything about it that surprises you at all?
I saw a production down in Washington at the Arena Stage a few months ago. I'm almost embarrassed to say it. I sat there and watched the play, and I thought, this is a pretty good play. I'd gotten enough distance on it mm-hmm. to be able to be even more objective about it.
But, for example, with the Zoo story, you wanted to go back and write another act. Have you ever been tempted to tamper with A Delicate Balance?
No, that's okay. All I do is occasionally I will cut a line here and there if I get bored.
What is it about A Delicate Balance, then, that you think that makes it timeless? Because it is a timeless play.
Well, it's about people who have closed down, mm-hmm. who haven't left themselves open to take advantage of circumstance. And when something really tough and important comes up, they don't have the equipment anymore. And that's one of the saddest things, that people stop staying awake and alert and fully participating in their lives.
Technically speaking, what was the greatest challenge about actually writing this play?
Oh, I don't know, staying interested in it, I suppose. I don't know. I don't remember any challenge. I knew the people, I liked what was going on, I knew what was going to happen, and I just turned it over to the characters and let them talk, mm-hmm. which is the way I write.
How long does it take you to write a play like A Delicate Balance?
2 answers. All my life. Mm-hmm. And as long as each particular play takes. Mm-hmm. Some plays take a few weeks, some take a few months.
This play is dedicated to John Steinbeck.
Yeah, John and I were very good friends. We had a few arguments about politics occasionally. But I like John a lot, and I knew him well.
What did you admire most about him as a novelist?
Well, what I admired most about John is the intelligence of his convictions, whether I agreed with them all or not. John took me with him when he went to the Soviet Union for the first time. He went over as part of the cultural exchange program, and he was invited to take a young American writer with him. And so he took me, because he liked the Zoo Story and a couple of other plays, The Death of Bessie Smith, that I'd written. And being with John in the Soviet Union and watching the way he didn't put up with any of the Soviet nonsense was quite instructive.
What's your opinion of The Grapes of Wrath? A lot of Oklahomans take issue with it, but I read it along with Steinbeck's Working Days, and I think it's just brilliant. Do you consider it his masterwork?
Oh, I don't even like to think in those terms. The masterwork is the total accumulation.
The body
always,
of work.
with any writer.
The body of work. We talked about the film version of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. There's been a film version of A Delicate Balance directed by Tony Richardson, starred Katharine Hepburn, Paul Scofield.
Well, I would say that it starred Paul Scofield and Katharine Hepburn.
Okay, better get that billing right. And
Yeah,
that's from the
because I think his performance was more profound than hers, but she was good.
And she was more famous in a way. So is that what got her?
Fortunately, the character she was playing resembled her a lot.
Let's look at this video clip with Paul Scofield.
The cat that I had. The cat that I had when I was a year or so before I met you. She was very old. I'd had her since I was a kid. She must have been 15 or more. An alley cat. She didn't like people very much, I think. When people came, she'd pick up and walk away. She liked me. Or rather, I could see that when I was alone with her, she was content. I don't know if she was happy, but she was content.
Yeah.
And how the thing happened, I don't really know. One day I realized that she no longer liked me. No, that's not right. One day I realized that she must have stopped liking me some time before. And one evening, I was sitting alone home, and I was suddenly aware of her absence. Not just that she wasn't in the room with me, but that she hadn't been in rooms with me, watching me shave, just about, and I couldn't place how long. She hadn't gone away, you understand. Rather, she had, but she hadn't run off. I knew she was around. I remembered I'd caught sight of her from time to time under a chair moving out of her room. And it was only when I realized something had happened that I could give any pattern to the things that I'd noticed.
What was it about Paul Scofield's performance that really brought Tobias to life?
The intelligence, the concentration, the accuracy, the truth of what he was doing.
We were talking in the first segment, and I told you how much I had enjoyed reading The Goat, or Who Is Sylvia. It had some wonderful comic lines, and certainly the tragedy is there. Do you agree with critics who would describe this as your most daring work to date?
No, not necessarily. I've got one called Me, Myself, and I, which should be coming to Broadway in the fall. It's maybe even a little more surprising. And I've got another one in my head that I think will make those others seem like pikers.
Well, good. Well, you have described The Goat and characterized it as being about love and about loss.
And The Goat is also about the fact of where on earth is our value system.
And causing us to question our tolerance. How tolerant? What are the limits of our tolerance?
And the limits of our tolerance and how preposterous the limits are.
Mm-hmm. It is preposterous. Did it surprise you, the reaction to it?
I'm always surprised by things that surprise me.
You had to be relishing the idea that this was going to open and that you were going to get to see it.
Two of my closest friends, after I finished the play and let them read it, both of them, both highly intelligent, sensitive people who care a lot about me, said, "Edward, you must not allow this play to be performed. It will destroy your career."
Really?
And that's intelligent people.
Yeah.
And I said, I think you're wrong. If anything, it's going to help it. And so it opened, shocked a lot of people, but has gone on to have a huge life.
Do you think people totally misunderstood the play, or a lot of people totally
Of course.
misunderstood it? They got totally sidetracked.
Listen, in commercial theater, in the commercial world, you take it where you can get it. If they like something for the wrong reason, that's better than not liking it.
We talked a little bit in the first interview. We didn't really get to go into it. But in addition to your love of theater, you're very interested in the visual arts.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any overlaps between playwriting and painting, playwriting and sculpting?
Well, the closest interrelationship overlapping is with classical music and playwriting. They're both heard experiences.
Mm-hmm.
They're also seen experiences. But a playwright writes very much the way a composer composes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it does help if you have a visual sense, because a play is a seen experience as well. There are very few things that are both literature and a heard experience and a seen experience completely at the same time. A play is one of the very few.
Now, you're an art accumulator.
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a collector.
Yeah, you make an important distinction. I wonder if you might elaborate on that.
Well, I go to so many houses of wealthy people, and I see all the famous paintings and expensive art on the wall, and I can just tell these people had somebody get these for them. They didn't know enough about art to get this stuff, and they usually end up with second-rate examples of first-rate artists.
I see what you're saying.
And so whatever I've accumulated, an awful lot of African art, an awful lot of contemporary art, pretty good stuff. It's just because I have a fairly informed taste myself about the visual arts as well as other things.
In the past, you've talked a lot about the marriage between commercialism and art with great concern. Are you just as concerned about that today, even more so in this?
Even worse.
Can it get even worse than it is now?
Oh, sure. Of course, it can get so much worse all the time. But commerce is winning. There's the problem.
Do you see it turning around?
Well, anytime an audience wants to say, we would rather see serious plays than all these junk musicals that the Disney organization is bringing to Broadway. Anytime people say that, it will happen.
What positive signs can we point to?
That off-Broadway still exists, that some of the best plays are done in the small theaters.
Tell us a little bit about the Edward Albee Foundation.
Long time ago, when I was making a bunch of money off of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, a very bright man who was giving me some financial advice said, "You don't want to give all this money to the government, do you?" I said, "Certainly not."
No.
He said, "Well, why don't you start a foundation?" Which is something I'd been thinking about doing anyway. And have a place, establish a place where people, young writers and composers and painters and sculptors can come and live and work. And that way you can exercise your taste in there as well, and also be helpful to younger people. So I started the foundation, bought a big barn in Montauk for them, and for the past 40 years people have been coming out to live and work in Montauk and get good work done.
What are some of your greatest successes? Some of the artists who really excelled there in that environment?
I didn't bring my list with me.
But okay, that's a good safe answer. Because I know as writers, Yaddo was the place to go. So many people wanted to go to Yaddo in the days. And, so,
and the MacDowell Colony.
And the MacDowell Colony and all of that. Your new play is going to be debuting on Broadway in 2009. Tell us a little bit about that.
About what?
Your new play.
No.
No, you won't. Well, you're going to have to.
Well, no. It involves identical twins and the nature of identity and a totally crazy mother.
Is Kathleen Turner going to be starring in this?
No, she's not.
No. I had read somewhere that she might be.
It was one of the things, but that's not going to happen.
You've done a lot of work with Kathleen Turner.
Yes, we worked together.
When you work with an actor or an actress over a period of time, do you develop a special chemistry with that person?
Well, the chemistry has to be there, or you're not going to work with them over and over.
That's true. That's well said. What do you look to now as things that you want to go ahead and accomplish? Because you're still very prolific. You've got a lot of things going on.
I just keep right on going in my career. I will keep on until I'm gaga.
And you teach.
And I teach, and I write things other than plays. And, I'm thinking about writing a book helpful to playwrights about surviving in the theater.
What's the most important lesson you could impart to them? There's several, I'm sure.
There are a lot of them. I don't know. Never lie. Most important to yourself or to anybody else. And understand that there are all kinds of success, and only one of them really matters. And you've got to figure out which one that is.
When you look back over your body of work, which plays stand out to you as the ones that are most definitive for you personally? It doesn't matter what the critics
Well, it
think.
must have been the Zoo Story, since that was the first one. And that revealed to me that by nature I was a playwright. Mm-hmm. So obviously that was a very important event. The others have, just happened. The other 29 or 30 have just happened.
And some are more reflective of your life at various stages, or your thinking at various stages, not your life, because we've established it's not autobiographical.
As I say, I don't think about myself in the third person. I don't think about my plays that way, so I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever tried to be a critic or thought about being a critic?
I am a critic.
What is the hardest thing that you have to do as a critic?
I'm a critic of our society.
A critic of our society, absolutely. But what is the hardest thing that you think a good critic has to do? Because obviously a lot of the reviews that we see are political, that they're not really tuned in, that sometimes they're not very intelligent, frankly.
To understand what the true meaning of success in a work of art is, it has nothing to do with how commercial it is, or how popular it will become, or how many people will like it. The true value of a work of art is how it changes us, how it makes us more aware of what consciousness is all about.
What sorts of things do you teach now? When you teach, what do you teach? What kinds of courses do you like to teach?
I try to encourage people to pay attention to the things that really matter in whatever art they're involved in. And, most important, not to lie.
Mm-hmm. Do you do a lot of working with students on student productions, just to give them the chance to work with someone of your stature? Mm-hmm. And do you get a chance to do that?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
And how hard is it for you? Because I know a lot of people want to bring you scripts that they've written, and they want your feedback on that. What do you see your obligation in that sense? You really don't have an obligation to read it.
Well, the obligation is there to encourage those who've done something worthwhile and to quietly sideline those who haven't.
How successful have you been at the sidelining those who haven't?
Some people are very persistent.
Not quite as successful as you would like to be in your career. As you look to the future and some of the projects that you're going to be doing, some of the ones that are going to shock us a little bit, take us even further than the goat, is that part of what, when you reach a certain stage?
I don't sit down in the morning and say, now I must find out how to shock people.
No,
it's something that comes into my mind that wants to be a play, that it emerges that it's going to be shocking. Well, that's okay, but I don't set out to shock.
Now, we've talked about the contributions of regional theater, of off-Broadway. What about of regional theater?
Regional theater does a good job, except more and more with the economic problems we're having. Regional theater more and more is turning into an imitation of Broadway, unfortunately. And doing safe things.
What do you consider Broadway's heyday, if there was such a thing?
When there was no other kind of theater, possibly, which meant that they had to do some good stuff.
And why do you think it has changed? Has it just been the economy? Has it just been this drive for commercialism? Are people as committed to the theater as they once were?
It doesn't seem so to me. It seems that people seem to want less. The more they pay for something, the less they want.
And what about the caliber of acting talent? Is it the same
today? There's no
today?
problem. Look, the only problem in theater is the relationship between the audience and the critics, and the misinformation that they give each other. Mm-hmm. We've always had a lot of first-rate playwrights, and a lot of first-rate actors, and a lot of first-rate directors. There's no problem in the craft of theater. The problem is what people seem to think they've been told they should want.
And they're so willing to accept that.
Yes, exactly.
So we have to be not lie to
I
ourselves.
suppose if you're spending a ridiculous $120 for a theater seat, you better take the advice of a critic who tells you that nothing's going to happen to you that will upset you.
You know, I've asked you about the great playwrights. Who are some of the great actors? If you were to point to some of the great,
Well, I've worked with an awful lot of first-rate actors. I mean, with Paul Scofield and John Gielgud and other people in England and first-rate American actors. I've worked with an awful lot of first-rate actors, and an awful lot of first-rate actors that nobody's ever heard of.
And that's got to be frustrating in a way when you see great talent playwrights and actors that's not realized because of the emphasis on commercial appeal or something.
I tell acting students, the only real problem you're going to have in the theater if you're any good is that you're going to have to spend so much of your time acting in rotten plays because that's what most people want to see.
When we mentioned the British theater, you mentioned a lot of British actors that you admire. Is the state of the British theater better right now than American theater?
Oh, the British theater is a little better off because they have a couple more national theaters, more subsidized, serious theaters. And also they have a longer tradition of going to the theater and paying attention to the theater that we have in this country.
When we were talking about the great classical writers, we didn't touch on, of course, Shakespeare, and we need to before.
He's okay.
Is he okay?
Most of his plays are very good.
You think
Most of them are okay.
They're okay?
Yeah.
Would you have any advice for him?
Stop writing that weird language.
Yes, make this get more into the vernacular and get more into everyday parlance.
And don't expect me to believe that ghost in Hamlet is a real ghost. Don't expect me to believe that. I never will. I just went to see a very good production of Hamlet, which lost me at the very beginning because Hamlet, the ghost, was supposed to be real.
We just touched on briefly about your work as a director. As a director, when you're doing someone else's play, what's it like directing someone else's work?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't direct anything you don't respect and you can't learn something from. That's why I like to direct Beckett and good people like that. My job as a director is to do an accurate translation of the play from the page to the stage without damaging it.
Do you think because you're a playwright yourself, you're more sensitive to that?
I think as a playwright, I probably am. I'm more aware of what the playwright needs to have done, yes.
Mm-hmm. And what about with the actors? Do you sometimes, when you see actors that just aren't living up and not doing what you expect?
Well, mind you, as a director, you don't hire anybody that you don't think is going to live up to you. The director and the playwright have mutual approval of actors.
But doesn't it sometimes happen that maybe you're surprised that someone just doesn't live up to that potential? And then
then you get rid of them.
Is that hard for you to do, or are you able to be
It doesn't
objective?
happen very often.
And
Out of the hundreds of people that I've worked with, in my own work especially, I can only think of 4, whom I will not name publicly, that I thought were a total mistake in having hired and wanted to get rid of.
For the sake of the play, you're able to be objective about it in that sense. You have to, really, don't you? In order, that's part of not lying to yourself as a playwright and as a director. When you think of all of the plays that have been of yours that have been produced, what is probably the best production of your work that you've seen by another director? We know that yours are the best. But
there's so many good ones. So many more good ones than bad ones.
And that's got to be really satisfying to you.
Well,
that's a positive.
I'm very careful in the choice of director.
And do you think even, and Edward, colleges do your plays all the time, regional companies, community theaters. How do you feel about that? Certainly they can't compete.
You try to write a play that is going to be actor and director proof. So no matter how hard they try to screw up, they can't succeed.
Have you ever been horrified?
Of course.
How do you handle that? You say you're visiting somewhere and they say, "Oh, Edward, we just in honor of you, we've launched this play, one of your plays."
I was in a city, which I will not name,
Well, a lot of these things not
a
getting
number of
named
years
today.
ago, to see a production of a play of mine, which I will not name,
Okay.
which had starring in it a couple of failed actors. They're the worst kind. They're still
Yes,
on
they
there.
are.
They're still on there, big frogs in small ponds. And they had me in the front row since the thing was in my honor, so to speak. They had me in the front row. Staying in this big chair, it's almost they put clamps on me so I couldn't do anything. Within 5 minutes, I wanted to stand up and turn and say to the actors, "Hold." Something I've always wanted to say to actors, "Hold," but I've never said. And turn to the audience and say, "Go away. This is not my play." But I was very polite and very nice. And so I just sat there.
But it stayed with you. It stays with you.
That memory stayed with me. Yeah.
Because you know that the audience...
But I made a note. I made the name of the actors who were screwing up my play. And they are on that list that I still keep to this day of people never to work with.
And we'll never know that list, though.
No.
See, that's again, if you wrote your memoir, there would be some names many names you'd have to leave out that we couldn't get anywhere.
You know, most people that aren't any good you're indifferent to. But every once in a while you find one or two that are really so awful.
And as a playwright, are you kind of at the mercy of these people to a certain extent?
No, you're not. I'm not. No playwright is, because we have it in our contract that we have to work only with the directors and actors that we want to work with.
Even like in regional companies or
sure.
college companies.
I have approval of the cast of all professional productions of my plays.
That's good. This time has flown by. You've been very kind to share with us like you did. Even though you didn't reveal the names, we're thrilled that you were here. And thank you so much for being here, Mr. Albee, Edward.
Good to see you again.
It's good to see you, sir. And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.